Hello. In this section, we're going to be discussing uPAR and ASPEN. Joining me today is Jacqueline Haynes, Special Education Technology ISS at headquarters, and myself, Aaron Marsters, Assistive Technology ISS for Europe East. The uPAR helps educators identify read-aloud accommodations for human readers and text-to-speech. These read-aloud accommodations can be used for classroom instruction, classroom assessments, and DoDEA system-wide assessments.
But keep in mind, not all classroom accommodations are allowable on system-wide assessments. Please ensure that you review these accommodations and the appropriate content areas.
In this sample scenario, we have a 10th grade student who is independently reading at a 4th grade level. But with adult read-aloud accommodation or text reader accommodation, the student is able to access grade level text. This information can be used to add accommodations within the IEP for access to instructional materials.
Hey Aaron, it shows that this student can benefit from adult reader as well as text reader. How do we determine which one should we select for this student?
Great question. Ultimately, this is a local CSE decision, but all things being equal, I tend to default to having the student use a text reader over an adult reader, as this provides the student greater independence and gives them more control over the grade level material. In this hypothetical situation, the CSE met and decided that text-to-speech would be the most appropriate accommodation for this student, due to the fact it increases independence and access to the curriculum. So now we're ready to document within the IEP.
Developing the IEP, it's important to detail and note this accommodation in the goal, as well as indicating the special factors of assistive technology.
Draw your attention to the top of the screen where you notice that assistive technology has been selected as a special factor for this goal. Also notice that within the goal, text-to-speech as an accommodation is listed as a modifier. Please remember to list features such as text-to-speech and not specific programs or software.
As you can see, the CSC team has determined that text-to-speech for math is a required accommodation for this student under the system-wide and general assessment accommodations. They also indicated it under the classroom assessment as well as other assessments to use for other content areas, as you can see for math, language arts, reading, science, and social studies.
Jacqueline, I have a question. Why was text-to-speech only listed under math for a system-wide accommodation?
Aaron, because DoDEA has determined that text-to-speech is only allowable for our math assessment at this time. However, Aaron, that doesn't mean that the student can't be afforded this accommodation for other content areas in the classroom as part of their instructional practice.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for providing that explanation and clarification. The previous example, there was a clear benefit to adult reader or text-to-speech accommodations as it allowed the student to access text at grade level. In this scenario, there's some benefit. We have an 11th grade student independently reading at a 7th grade level, and with a text-to-speech, they are able to comprehend text at 9th grade. But unfortunately, there is still a 2-grade gap between their accommodated level and their grade level. So what is the CSE supposed to do? What does this look like and sound like within the meeting and within ASPEN? When looking at this data, the CSE should recognize that a reading accommodation through text-to-speech does have a benefit for the student, and they should consider adding it as an accommodation for standardized assessments, classroom assessments, and potentially a modifier for reading goal. The CSE should also consider, though, that the text-to-speech accommodation is not sufficient by itself for accessing grade-level curricular content, and that additional resources, specialized instruction, or accommodations may be needed. In our last example, we have a 7th grade student who is able to independently read at a 5th grade level. But unfortunately, there was no improvement or no benefit when providing an adult read-aloud accommodation or a text-to-speech or text reader accommodation. When considering special factors for the IEP, modifiers to a goal, or accommodations, the data does not support the use of text-to-speech as a way to enable access to accessible instructional materials or the student's FAPE. The CSE should consider adjusting reading materials and/or provide specialized instruction to achieve comprehension of grade-level content. Typically, a CSE will use the uPAR data to determine read-aloud accommodations or text-to-speech accommodations for a student.
Remember, this is just a screening tool to provide clear data on the benefits of text to speech or human reader only. It's recommended to administer the uPAR at least once a year. Whether it is to determine accommodations for the first time on an initial review or as an annual review of accommodations to determine if text to speech or human reader is still appropriate. This would apply to triennial reviews as well as any modifications to an IEP.
We thank you for your time today as you learned more about uPAR and went through the different training modules.
If you have further questions, please contact your ATISS or pose any questions that you may have in the uPAR Schoology group, and we'll be sure to answer those for you.
Good luck as you start using uPAR data to consider reading accommodations for students.